Hey, welcome to Stocks, Tech, and Beer, where we talk stocks and tech while drinking a cold beverage. Today, we're going to talk about a new development in the geopolitical realm, and that is the US China trade war getting escalated again by President Trump. And we're going to talk about the trade war playbook that I developed back in 2017 when I was writing a newsletter called the Palm Beach Daily, and I helped guide hundreds of thousands of readers through the perilous times and the ups and downs of a trade war and the ramifications for your investments. But before we get there, let's talk about our beer. Now, I hope as you're watching this, you've got an adult beverage of choice. I recommend beer, but there's nothing wrong with a healthy pour of wine or a tall sifter of whiskey or bourbon. I got a beer here. I'm traveling around the state of Wisconsin. I went to Milwaukee and I'm up in Green Bay right now, staying in a hotel. So if you hear some random noises in the background, that's probably that. But I couldn't believe how cheap hotels were. I mean, I'm paying $60 a night to stay here in the Hampton, comes with breakfast. I mean, that's cheaper than rent. I don't know how these hotel companies are going to be surviving in this new kind of environment, because I would say this Hampton Inn here in Green Bay, I mean, it's very anecdotal, but it's no more than half full right now. And it's the hoteliers need to have 70-80% occupancy on a regular basis to really thrive. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in the earnings coming up in these next couple of quarters. I am not hopeful for that. I'm going to steer clear of hotels, even though some of these hotels might appear to be good bets in the trade war playbook based upon where the revenue comes from. But with the coronavirus, no one's traveling. I don't want to have any part of the hotels. So, anyways, onto this beer. Milwaukee stopped at Eagle Park Brewery. It's really one of my favorite breweries in the world. Maybe not the world. It's one of my favorite. It's a top 3 brewery in Wisconsin. That's for sure. They're really known for their IPAs and their sours and slushies. They're really amazing. Here I have the Loop Station Golden Ale. A little bit different. It has a little, it's an ale, but it's got a little sweetness added to it, and it's got a little lime and salt. Let's see what we think. It's crisp, but I'm not a fan of the salt added to my beer without any checks and balances in it. It almost kind of tastes like a salty piece of bread on the finish. Really disappointed. Not one of their finer brews. I think you should probably stick with what they're known for, which is IPAs and slushies. I give their Golden Ale a 4 out of 10. Not high at all. Not representative of the brewery as a whole, but we'll get better beers reviewed for them soon enough. So first off, I just want to say, probably going to piss off just about everybody with the 2 statements I'm about to make here, but just hold on, listen, see what you think, and make your decision after you hear what I have to say. First, I am for free trade. That is proven to benefit the most amount of people in the world. Free trade lowers costs. It allows countries that are more efficient to produce more of the goods they're efficient at and trade with a different country who may not be efficient at producing something. It allows the U.S. to grow a bunch of soybeans in our farmland, ship it over to China, and then China makes cheap electronics, sends it back to us. We all win. Otherwise, we'd be paying $100 for a cheap microwave here, whereas now we're paying like $30. And China gets cheaper soybeans because they don't have the proper farmland to produce those. So free trade works. It's a benefit for everyone, and it's made the world a wealthier place today. But China does not partake in free trade. So I think we need to get tough on them, and to do that, maybe we need to put up some trade barriers with China to get them to play ball with us. And that's what the Trump administration has done lately. Just take a look at what they have done with, WeChat and TikTok. They're like, 45 days? You guys aren't operating here if you're still owned by Chinese companies. I mean, TikTok is clearly a Chinese spyware. Like, the stuff they track off your phones, your contacts, your internet usage, like everything, it's allowing China to build a dossier on essentially all the children and TikTok users in the U.S. And that's not what we want. We can't have them spying and learning what U.S. people are doing. It's a national security matter. So I applaud Trump for doing that, and China doesn't allow U.S. internet companies to operate there freely anyway, so forget them. I think this is great. And we'll probably see other tariffs getting bumped up too. We put restrictions on some of their guys, and then China's applied sanctions on some U.S. senators and other politicians here. It's just going to go back and forth. It's going to escalate and escalate. Trump needs to have this war, needs to look tough going into the election because there's a race between him and Biden to appear who's going to be tougher on China. And no one wants to be the one that appears weak on China right now. It's a common enemy that the U.S. has, other than the coronavirus. Well, actually, the coronavirus might have sides at this point. Some people, not a big deal. Some people, it is a big deal. China, everyone agrees is a big deal, and we need to take care of it. So the trade war is going to escalate. And what has China done to us? I think the biggest thing is the intellectual theft that they do, the forced technology transfers and things like that. You can look back to, I want to say April 2001, early on in the Bush presidency, there was a U.S. reconnaissance plane flying over China. Somehow a Chinese fighter collided into it. Accident, I don't know, whatever, had to make an emergency landing in China. And the Chinese held the 24 crew member hostage for 12 days. And the reason why they held them hostage wasn't to you got to pay us or pay us for the fight or whatever. No, they had engineers going in and out of that plane to try to reverse engineer all of our reconnaissance technology, because we have the best cameras and equipment in our spy planes to see what's going on in the world. China wants to have that same technology we use to level the military playing field for them. And China would like to know where the U.S. bases of operations are so they could strike there quickly and knock out our capabilities for retaliation. It took 12 days to get settled in, and I'm sure China reverse engineered a lot of their technology from that plane. And it's not the only thing. There's one company, I want to say American Superconductors, they created software to control wind turbines and control the power generation from those. And just flat out Chinese company, I want to say Sinotech, just stole the software and put it in their own windmills. And eventually they found out. American Superconductors took them to court, but it didn't really matter because they didn't pay. I think American Superconductors won $1 billion settlement, but the Chinese company just was like, nah, we don't know you anything. Good luck getting the money from us. China's even just stolen the recipe to produce the white stuff within Oreos. They steal everything they can technologically, and this could come as a huge advantage because they don't need to have a big R&D department like we do here in America to produce our, bleeding edge technological advances, even if it's a technological advancement of the white stuff in Oreos. And that allows them to sell stuff for cheaper, and it's not an even playing field right now. That's definitely the worst. I mentioned how China prohibits U.S. internet companies from gaining a foothold there. That allows Chinese web companies an advantage to grow and gain that mass adoption that you need to have a platform go. And that's how Alibaba became a thing. The Chinese Twitter is Weibo. That allowed that to take off. And then there's Tencent, which is a big conglomerate of video games and social networking, and their WeChat apps, a lot like WhatsApp here. And just it allows the Chinese companies an advantage within China to gain that mass adoption, and then it pretty much makes it impossible for any other company to get in there, because once you have enough people on the network, that's where the value lies, and it's hard to surpass that with anything else. And then China has their Made in China 2025 plan, where they highlighted a few cutting edge technologies that they want to be the world leader in, and then the government will go and provide subsidies and make it harder for other companies to partake in that industry within China. Things like semiconductors and artificial intelligence, those are huge things that they're trying to do there, and they're subsidizing the research and development and the building of factories. And by doing that, that allows the Chinese semiconductor manufacturers to produce semis more efficiently. Luckily, they haven't been able to beat U.S. technology yet, but that could be changing. And really, the Chinese companies, they'll produce the previous generation of semiconductors, like the 10 nanometer semiconductors, right now, just ripping off U.S. technology, and then they're selling it cheaper than most of our companies are willing to do. And it's just one example of how it's just not a fair playing field. Those are really the worst of the worst. China's also been known to overproduce certain things, like steel rods, and then dump them on the world market, which collapses prices and forces other companies into bankruptcy. And sometimes the Chinese government will put extra tariffs or non-tariff trade barriers on certain goods, and that causes other problems too for companies, and it's not a fair playing field within the country of China. So really we need to rip the band-aid off, take a little bit of pain, and reset the trade relationship with China. And both Trump and Biden want to do this, so it's going to happen, it's going to progress, and it's going to impact our investments. So you have to ask yourself, what investments will thrive during a US-China trade war? And like I said, we'll go back to the 2017 playbook to see what worked and what didn't work. So first things first, smaller companies usually do better during the trade war. And that's because these smaller companies typically don't have as big of an international reach as the larger companies do. Because once you get to a certain size, you're going to have to go outside of the country to gain some extra revenue, sales, and continue to grow your profits like you did just here in the US. And that's the other thing, you want to have mostly US based revenue. And you want to have most of your manufacturing done in the US if possible, because you don't want any tariffs to go on goods that were made in China and shipped over here. And you don't want to have, like Chinese authorities could even take over a factory over there or tell their companies to stop producing stuff for you. So you want to have as much control as possible within the United States, which historically is one of the best places to do business because we respect the rule of law, and we're not going to go and force U.S. companies to do something that would be unadvantageous to U.S. companies. You want to have all your revenue within the U.S. or as much as possible. Small cap companies have a much higher percentage of revenue in the United States. If you look at the Russell 2000 index, which holds small cap companies, I believe about 70% of revenue there comes from the U.S., whereas in the S&P 500, which are larger companies, have less than 50% of revenue coming from inside the borders of the U.S. So a trade war could definitely impact those companies more. So what do you invest in? Unfortunately, there's not really a trade war America First ETF. A couple years ago, some ETF company released the MEGA ETF, ticker symbol MAGA, and that supposedly holds companies that do well with Republican policies. All right, it's not perfect. I just would recommend the Russell 2000 ETF. Easy to buy, low fees, and it's got the smaller companies with more revenue within the U.S. So that's really how I play this on a broad scale. If there's enough interest from y'all, we might talk about individual companies eventually, but for right now, the trade war, we want to stick to small cap U.S. companies. Our economy is huge. It's getting better. As soon as the coronavirus passes us, we'll see the economy open back up and these companies will start to thrive, and it'll be good for the Russell 2000, which should outperform the S&P, at least for the rest of the year, maybe into the following year if the trade war really ratchets up. So there you have it. There's a trade book, simple, concise, easy. You want small companies, US based, US revenue, and US manufacturing operations. That's it. Simple as that. Best way to do that is the Russell 2000 ETF over the S&P 500. That's it. Cheers.